I believe, oh, great. I believe that, this conversation is really important, especially for Black, Indigenous, and people of color who have not really had a platform or a space in the environmental field for far too long. And I know Andres will probably talk more about the Green 2.0 report, which I always cite on Brown Girl Green as a really awesome piece of evidence that actually tracks the data that shows the disparities and the lack of representation of Black, Indigenous, and people of color in this sector. And I think it's really important that if we are building a green, sustainable economy, we have to figure out who is getting a seat at the table and who's being neglected, because that has real material consequences on what our cities, our local governments, and our world overall is going to look like in this next century. So I'm so excited to talk to these experts about how we can actually really implement and create tangible action around diversity, equity, and inclusion to actually make sure that we have a green economy that actually works for everyone. So I wanted to ask this first question, and anyone can take this question, but the first one asks, what efforts have previously been made to increase the presence of Black, Indigenous, and people of color within the environmental sector? And I would love, to build off of that. What have you seen that's either been successful or things that have been stalled or slowed down? And yeah, why do you think that is? Anyone could take that.
So I think for me, with your question about what efforts have been previously made in respect to the presence of people of color. Well, before I start, I just want to everybody know I'm here in Los Angeles, which is Tongva, Chumash, and land, and it is unceded territory. And thank you, Christy. I'm really excited about being you being the moderator. It's just, I always love looking at all your social media. It's really impressive. And also being participating here with Andres. So before I start, I have to say thank you. Also to the organization that invited me. Thank you. So what efforts have been previously made for sure for people of color? Well, for me, being a sustainability professional, for 20 years, back in the day, in 1998, I was an intern for LADWP, and it was for Green Power Free Green LA. And to me now that's being called the Green Power Alliance. So the iterations of things just changing is always happening, right? But in my 20 years in the sustainability profession, it's always been the triple bottom line: equity, environment, and economy. That equity part has always been there, but it seems like we've always been trying to those three bubbles have been trying to expand, extract. They've all been having their own charge, but definitely right now we're seeing that equity bubble in that triple bottom line being much more bigger. So I'm happy to see that, because in sustainability, those need to be equal. Also, what I've seen before, the efforts is that people have been doing policy, but I feel like policy has always been like a patch. And that's what I feel like we also need to be perking ourselves up to as us, as the global majority, as we need to understand with all these equity policies that, is it real? Is it tactile? Is there measurable things that we have to ensure of? Because these efforts are happening, especially after last year, all the social movements after George Floyd. We see all these things happening, but we need to make sure that they're actually tangible and truly being done. So that is also a charge that we all have to do collectively. And that also what has been previously seen, from what I've seen in my 20 years, a lot of tokenism. And I think that also needs to be real. The fragility of white fragility, thinking, oh, we're gonna, let's do, the reality of those things is happening. And people don't like to be told that. I've been in many rooms where well, that doesn't feel good. I'm like, your mission is sustainability. Your mission is the community. So we just need to always be present about what's happening, present to what has been previously done, and make sure that what was done previously is not continuing on with these patches of policy, and we ensure that tokenism is not happening. And then equity just being a thing, a fad. No, it's here to stay. And I think that with all that right now, and my charge is to to continue these conversations, to continue addressing fragility, why fragility, to continue being a leader in the room. So all that to say that that's been my experience, but I'll give it to Andres.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just building on what Patty said, and hi, Christy. Thanks for that wonderful introduction. So what I want to talk about, where I want to focus on this question is, what's been going on that's going right, and what's going the wrong way. And so one of the things is we see plenty of amazing leaders for decades now, really chipping away and working on this day and night. We have Dr. Dorceta Taylor. We have, folks like Dr. Michael Dorsey, et cetera, so many in the field to name that have just been working and making sure it's a priority and really chipping away every day, working with organizations, working with foundations, working with the entire movement. But the problem is that organizations and foundations for decades now will pay attention to this issue of diversity and say, oh, this is us, we're gonna work on it, we're gonna prioritize it. And then another, something else happens and their attention is turned away. It's not in the media anymore. So then they turn away to whatever is in the media. We can't seem to get foundations and organizations to focus long-term on this critically important issue. And so what we're seeing right now is, as Patty mentioned, and Christy, you mentioned it as well, is kind of foundations and organizations once again turning toward diversity and saying, we need to prioritize this, we need to work on this. Foundations are saying, we want to give to these organizations saying, we need to change who sits at the table. Christy, as you mentioned, one of the things I always say, it's great to have a seat, but you also need to have a voice. And so what we're seeing is the attention right now on diversity. Our goal right now has to be that even when it's not in the news, even when it's not coming up every day on social media, we need to keep pushing. We need to hold organizations and foundations accountable, not only in the short term, but in the long term. And one of the things that Green 2.0 does, as you mentioned, Christy, is we do several reports. And one of them is the report card that you mentioned, where we look at organizations and foundations and we take a deep dive and we say, are you being transparent? Are you hiring a diverse group? Are you looking at changing the way your board looks? And so that's just one tool, because at the end of the day, if organizations and foundations aren't changing culturally and making sure that they are hiring for all positions, scientists, communication, VPs, finance, it can't just be this idea that, oh, don't worry, we hired a head of DEI, we hired a people consultant, so we're good here. We've done our work, we checked the box, because that's complete failure. We need to make sure that the amazing background and gifted, wonderful people of color in all sorts of different fields who are passionate about the environment are given that seat, but more importantly, that voice.
Wow, that was really good. I was just so intently listening, I forgot to unmute myself. Yeah, and I would also say that another amazing part of the Green 2.0 report, which I remember came out, I think 2018, I forget which year, talking about leaking talent. So there's also a report talking about even when organizations do bring people of color into their organizations, they're not able to actually retain them because they don't actually provide the resources or support that actually makes them want to stay. So I think that's also to add on to what you're saying, that it's, and what Patty was saying, that there's these bandages to these much larger systemic issues. If we're not willing to face the more complicated, but yet so not complicated issues around white fragility, white supremacy in our organizations or institutions, how are we going to actually have any form of a DEI solution that's actually going to meet the needs and the challenges of, creating an equitable working environment for people to actually feel like they have a voice in that space. So I love what both of you said about that. And so, on that systemic level, how does everyone, regardless of their age, gender, racial, ethnic background, benefit from a more diverse environmental sector? Because maybe people are like, oh yeah, it's nice to bring, more diversity into the room, but what actually are the benefits of that for people who may not, fully grasp that concept?
Patty, if you don't mind, I'll take this one first, if that's all right with you. Christy, great question. And one of the things that's happened to me in my career is I've sat in rooms with 30, 40 organizations all looking the same. These rooms are white, older men, leaders in their field, in the environmental field, and you look around and almost always I was the only person of color representing the organization. How is that going to make change? I always talk about the importance of not just change, but accelerated change. And as long as we continue to have those same voices talking about what communities of color need, what the resources that these communities need, what is best for these communities, and actually not involve them and not have a voice from those communities is ridiculous. And to think that we're going to move forward as an environmental movement, as a group, a very passionate group, without having that knowledge, that community-based knowledge, is ridiculous, because we will not move forward until we bring those amazing diverse backgrounds to the table, give them a voice, and ask them, what is happening? How can we help? What resources do we need? We need, as an environmental organization and group and foundations, to stop talking and listen. We need to listen to these communities. It is imperative for us to move forward, to actually stop talking, listen, and find out how we can help.
I love what you just said, Andres. Just to give also an example for myself. Again, as what Christy said in the beginning, I do have 20 years of experience with sustainability. I've been working with Fortune 100s, cities. I've had a lot of years of experience being in different seminars, conferences, rooms, team rooms. And for example, the sustainability seminars that I've been for years, decades, maybe about 12 years, I would always see, it would always look a certain way. And I would remember when that one person of color would be in that panel, maybe one out of the whole conference, I'd be like, oh my God. And I felt, that excitement, that, oh my God, I feel relatable. Oh my God, they're from this part. Oh my God, I totally get it. So yeah, what is the benefit? That excitement, that person that feels seen. I felt seen, I felt heard. Actually, I wrote a blog about this, about how last year, it really brought us to attention about how it's, all these facades within sustainability. No, we're not even, we don't even have a strong equity view in our industry. And so for me, the benefit will be the beauty of the different perspectives, again, how I personally feel. And also I know that others, how they will feel. Last year in the Women of Color Collective in Sustainability seminar, we had a seminar last year, and the chat, oh my God, the chat was just beautiful. Aside from the panelists, everybody was talking about, oh my God, look at her dress, look at her glasses, like the humanity of that connection. So that is what is missing, our connection to each other. And I think when we have that in those rooms, when we're talking about planning, all those beautiful connections, we bring so much more power into those rooms. So I think there's just such an opportunity, and I hope that is seen more. And yeah, that is my answer.
Christy, if you don't mind me kind of touching a little bit more based on what Patty just said, because it's so important. If we aren't looking out and making sure that our youth see leaders of color in the environmental organizations, foundations, in any part of this work, they're going to put their passion elsewhere. They need to see that they will have a voice, a seat at the table, and that there is a place for them, whether they're in whatever role in an organization or whatever role they might want on the Hill or in foundations. But we need to keep the youth passionate. We need to keep them engaged, but we can't do that unless we show them that there are leaders of color in the environmental movement, that they will have a voice, that there is a place for them, and that organizations are changing culturally to invite them in, not only to invite them in, but also to keep them and retain them and use their amazing and diverse backgrounds.
And to even add on to that, Andres, I was asked some time ago from an organization, a sustainability organization, like, why haven't you been involved? Because I don't feel seen. And it's a big organization. And I feel that somehow that might have clicked on them, hopefully. But so yeah, you're right, Andres. So if our youth don't see us, and if there's not, then yeah, they're gonna steer away. But I think that's our charge too. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like trying to absorb everything you said. Yeah, I think I totally agree. I think for me, I didn't grow up in a like where I grew up, I wasn't really exposed to environmental issues. It was like my own journey, honestly. And once I like actually decided to major in this in university, I decided to major this in university. Basically, I didn't see anyone who looked like me. I didn't really have mentors. Yeah, it made me reconsider if I was even in the right field for a long time. And I considered like leaving because my other friends of color also left. And I was like, what am I doing by myself? But then I found awesome people, and now I continue to find awesome people. But now to get more into like this discussion around white fragility, and I know that we've all kind of talked about this. But who do you think is the responsible for addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion? It's a very big question. But I would love to ask, like, in the work that you've both done in DEI, in your own approaches, like who's responsible for this? How does it actually look to actually like start building this out? Because there may be folks in the audience who are like, okay, we understand that diversity is really important, but like, how do we actually operationalize that? Who's supposed to be responsible for that in an organization? So would love for you to like take some time, each of you, to like really kind of dive in and teach people about what does that actually look like?
Sure, Patty, I don't want to answer in front of you again, so happy to take it. But Christy, staff can push on these issues. Staff can obviously care about these issues, but until leadership makes a charge that says, we are building this into our mission, we are building this into the core values of who we are as an organization, until the board says, enough is enough, we need to change because it's our duty to our staff, to ourselves, to our volunteers and membership. This is a core, critical issue, but it has to come from leadership and from the board, because at the end of the day, as much as staff pushes, which is great, and it does cause change, as we've seen recently, at the end of the day, leadership is the one who needs to make that change. Leadership is the one who has to put these values, these ideas, these critical mission points into their strategic mission. It's fantastic when organizations have task forces and they have groups that talk about these issues, but until organizations put it in writing, in their strategic mission, that says this is who we are at the core foundation, this is how we are going to put resources and time and energy into this because it's something we care deeply about and we believe in, it won't change. So it's great when staff works on this. It's great when staff expresses interest and works on this and gets together and lets leadership know that it's important for them. But at the end of the day, the board and leadership must be working on this themselves, and they must let staff know that it's critically important and that they care.
I have to say, this question is very hard for me because I think the key word is what one group of people has more responsibility. I feel like we're giving power away. And to me, that is what's difficult about this question, but I'm going to answer it how I feel about it. Because really the thing is we are the global majority. And so I'm going to answer it two ways, how I feel about it within our global majority, and second about how the approach of what also Andres and merging that. We are the global majority, Women of Color Collective and sustainability. Why is it so successful? Because we had a gap. We felt like we were flourishing in there. Another group that I'm part of is the California Climate Network, California BIPOC Climate Network in California. Why is it so successful? Because we feel heard. We ensure that it is people of color there, BIPOC community, and there have been white allies that have asked to join us, and we said, sorry, this is our safe space. And these are leaders. These are leaders in California, and they know that this was a gap. So to me, it's first of all, us taking responsibility that we need to hear each other. We need to elevate each other. We need to ensure that, why am I feeling crazy about the situation at work? Am I crazy? You know, like, we support each other. No, you're not feeling crazy. Yes, there's a white fragility happening right now. So the first thing to me is join those types of groups. Make sure you feel heard, you know, just like you, Christy, people feel heard and seen by your social medias. With you, Andres, people feel, oh my God, there's a report telling me what I'm feeling. You know, all these things that collectively help us and support us. We need to continue those modes of communication, those modes of connection. Now, in respect to leadership within an organization, yes, you know, top-down approach, you know, the executive saying, this is our mission, putting it on paper. But I've heard and seen time and time again that even though it's on paper, the systems in which that person still feels heard, that person of color still is not there. Even though it's all fine print, it's not there. And I think in order for those types of situations to be successful, the organizations as a whole, our systemic organization needs to understand that white fragility is stopping us from feeling heard when we feel like, hey, you just said such and such to me. And the person, I didn't mean that, but do you understand that's white fragility? I really think that there needs to be a systemic change in total, that is what's happening. So responsibility there is that people need to understand white fragility, and it's going to be uncomfortable, period. So in order for those things to be successful within an organization, I've seen different ways. People have had, within organizations, had ways of tackling white fragility. Second is that also for these diversity groups that they feel there's like expression around them. There's a lot of different diversity groups in large organizations where they have their own conferences, their own months, they're being leveraged, they're being heard. So I think, yes, top down, but there needs to be a lot of systems in order for us as a global majority to feel heard within organization, and also to tackle white fragility. So that's my whole response.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, yeah, that I do feel like the question was kind of worded weirdly with like responsibility. I think it is one of those questions of like, well, we do have agency. We do have the ability to build our own table if the table doesn't have seats for us. And so I think that, yeah, I love being a part of Woke Sis. People here should definitely check it out. It's such a special community that I felt really connected to. And I think that, yeah, this is also a part of the discussion, like as people of the global majority, like how we interact with whiteness has to be in a way in which we are also, you know, building solutions and collaborating together and being able to like, you know, build these other spaces that have never existed for us because we thought that that was all we had. So I love that you brought all of that up, that there's a really important visioning piece of all of this, which is really important. And so I think with that visioning piece, you know, and just focusing more of our attention on how do we actually just build community and opportunities for our young people of color. We're talking about a green economy. How do you all feel we could go about creating more awareness or just more opportunities to get young people of color excited to want to, you know, participate and join in the green job sector? Of course, it's like a both and, not an either or situation where like organizations also need to like really do the work to be accommodating for that. Once people, you know, like myself, entered the workforce and we were like, oh, wow, we entered this organization that doesn't value me. Sick. That's great. Anyways, that's my own stuff. But I'm just saying that that's a common story for a lot of other young people of color in this field. But I'm just wondering, like, yeah, if you all have like seen programs or initiatives that have really tried to like get young people of color excited to bring them in these spaces and to also like sustain them as they're building their careers. And if you haven't seen that necessarily, what would that look like to you? Like, what are some of the interventions you think that could help that pipeline?
Great. That's a really important question. Those questions around youth and how to activate and keep youth passionate. So on our end, for example, we've done a few things here at Green 2.0. One, we have put together a new website, and on that website we have a career page, and we're constantly updating it, and it's free. And the idea is that staff of all ages, different organizations, different interests, can jump on this and find a free resource where they can look for jobs. So that's one. And two is we started a fellowship program. So we have 2 round-the-year fellows, and we use this as a mentor program. We use it to give them amazing projects, because as someone who was in the same space at some point in my life and in career, I would go to a job interview and they'd say, what's your work experience? And I said, well, that's what I'm looking for. And they'd say, you don't have any. And so we're offering work experience, and that helps with, again, mentoring and networking and giving fellows an idea of just kind of what it is to work in the environmental space and what challenges might happen, but also obviously show them the amazing things that can be done. And I've always said that I would rather not have started a fellowship, which I've done in the last 3 jobs that I've been at. I would rather not have started any of them if we weren't going to pay them. So we actually do a 3-month time frame for the fellowship, and we pay our fellows $6,000 for those 3 months. And so it is extremely important that they are paid for their time for so long. And still to this day, organizations say, come work for free, or maybe even, use your own money to get to work or get the supplies and everything that it takes to work here. And that's ridiculous. Organizations, if we're to bring in these amazing diverse backgrounds, need to be supplying and giving of these fellows times. And that means we need to pay them for their time. And we need to make sure that we're always increasing that pay to go along with the times. And so our idea at Green 2.0, if we can, is that every year we'll build on how much we're able to pay them and continue to push ourselves in that direction. And so that's some of the things we do at Green 2.0, really push, open up the community, open up the networks, and get new folks to stay and be passionate and be interested. We also do networking events with Green 2.0. For example, we have a trivia night that's coming up for youth, so that youth from different organizations can get together and kind of talk to one another and get to meet each other, because it's so important, as you mentioned, Christy, for these youth, passionate youth, to know one another, know they're not alone, know what's happening in different organizations, and really use that time to talk amongst one another. So those are just some examples.
This is a great question. All your questions have been great, Christy. To me, youth is such another passion for me in regards to how do we give them awareness? And why is it for me personally? Because when I was a kid, my parents loved me, but they definitely were always hard workers. My mom was a housekeeper. My dad was a machine shop worker. They didn't have the ins and outs of a Fortune 100 or a city, And so I didn't have that connection. But then when I had my first internship job with an agency, this was while I was at USC, I took note that other people that were also interns had a family member working there, a parent. And so it made me realize that I need to be that for a youth member, not for my child, but for my community. I need to show them that it is possible, because I don't have a parent. They don't have a parent. They also have a parent that's a housekeeper. So to me, that passion has always been there. So much so when I was already out of college, I would go to elementary schools, junior high schools, and speak to these students. And I would just see the light. I'm like, oh, you're an environmental engineer. What does that mean? And they would actually give me problem solving about certain situations. I'm like, oh my God, you should be it, So I actively would go into my community because I knew the situation. And I think us all know that. And so what it is in our charge is that we need to go out into those schools and share, career day or not career day. Maybe we have a family member that's a teacher or something, or maybe let's just go volunteer at a neighborhood school. So I think that's first is ourselves having our own charge, knowing that's the situation. They need to have those awareness. Second, again, the networks I'm part of do have a facilitation for youth or in engagement way in which they share with people where jobs are currently at. The Women of Color Collective in Sustainability definitely shares about job postings. Also the California Climate Network also shares about postings. So we're always sharing. I'm actually very grateful to them for these organizations because I wouldn't have known. So I think fundamentally for our youth, we need to always share with them, elevate them, and also be, those aunts and aunties for them because maybe they don't have that family member that works at that company, because that is the case. So for sure, also what the Wokesys does, they also have a collective resiliency fund for people that are starting their businesses. So there's also another avenue of giving a seed money, just like what Andres said. A lot of people that are starting, they need that funding, especially if they're interning. So to wrap that all up, I think each one of us individually, that's my request of the audience, is that we need to go out there and speak to the kids at their schools, share that it is possible, and then also join those networks and share with those networks that are giving that information about the job postings.
Yeah, that's amazing. I totally agree. I think one of the biggest issues that I see is young people who are like passionate about this, and then they just don't know how to navigate. They can't take unpaid internships. They can't just do all these nice fancy programs that expose you to conservation efforts in other countries, all these things that I envied some of my other classmates for having access to, that I didn't have access to when I was an undergrad at UC Berkeley. But I'd also want to move into talking more about providing a space where young people of color feel valuable in this movement, because I know that myself, the whole reason I even created Brown Girl Green was because I didn't feel valued in this movement. Brown Girl Green would not exist if I actually felt like there was not a diversity and equity problem in this field. Just as context, if people don't know what I do or what I talk about. And, when we're talking about holding organizations accountable, it goes back to that responsibility thing of we don't want to put our communities and our hearts and our minds in the hands of other people. But I think there's also something to say about what you were talking about at the beginning, Patty, around tokenization, and how do we ensure that we're not just bringing young people of color into the room, but actually making them feel cherished. And for me, I can just start it off answering my own question, and would love to hear your thoughts on this. A big part for me has been mentorship. It's also been having people who have gone out of their way to give me resources and networks that they knew I probably don't have access to. Being able to open some back doors for me that I didn't even know existed because no one taught me this in school. I didn't have access to that. Intergenerational wealth, things like that. And so I'm just wondering, from y'all's perspective, how can organizations or institutions who may have some of those keys to resources really think about reparations and redistribution in a meaningful way that's actually going to see shifts? So obviously not just bringing in people of color, because as we're seeing from Green 2.0, that doesn't necessarily do anything. It does things, but it's not really contributing to, addressing systemic racism in your institution. So yeah, I would love for you all to speak on redistribution, reparations, really what does that look like to make a young person of color feel valued in that space? Because I'm sure people in the audience may want to know what that looks like.
All right, I'll go. So first off, the career page and our trivia night are in the chat. If anyone is interested, it'd be great to have you there. And to answer Many questions, Christy. Yeah, mentorship is huge. I mean, coming into an organization and having a program where youth already understand that they'll have a mentor, that they understand what it takes to move up in an organization, that they understand just how the organization works is key. It makes it so much easier to kind of be able to guide someone and have them understand kind of what this organization is about. And I say that if an organization doesn't have this mentorship program, go out and find a mentor. They don't have to always work where you work. There's many valuable, interesting people, and you can take advice from so many different places. But organizations that do it right aren't just saying, let's make sure that someone is good when they come in, but they're looking out for their long-term future and career goals. So organizations that say, you know, they sit down with someone and they say, what would you like out of this position? So it's not always just about the organization and this is what you can do for us. Organizations that are actually asking, what can we do for you? What are some of your goals? How can we help you achieve some of these goals? Is there further education? Are there certificate programs? Are there things you'd like to join or start or work on? How can we help you and guide you? When organizations are asking that of youth, period, specifically diverse youth, you know, they're really saying, we believe in you, we trust in you, we want to make sure that you're here for the long term. And whether you're here at an organization or not, we want to make sure that you'll be in this field for the long term, because it's of value for everyone, and it's for the good of the environmental causes if we can keep that youth staying and passionate within this field.
That's awesome. Yes. So what I understand, you're asking, how do we keep them accountable, right? For the youth. Is that what you're asking, Christy? Yeah. Okay. So for me, as an engineer, I'm always about measuring. I'll start with that, and then I'll talk about other things. I really think that people need to give numbers as to what is the retention, how many, what is the diversity, why was it they left? Like, let's be transparent. You know, let's be real. Like, this is, again, I feel like we have an optimal time right now about being okay with being uncomfortable. Like, let's be uncomfortable. Like, let's change the systems about, no, let it be this way and that way. No, for me, my experience as a youth, and how I felt in regards to, you know, maybe a company feeling not, you know, how could they have been accountable? Like, you know, they'd say, oh, you know, maybe they shared with us in the exit interview. Like, no, let's talk about other ways in which they could have shared their accountability. Like, what, you know, I think asking the right questions to these students, like, what would have made you stay? What was missing? Like, really, like, why was it that even though we have all these exit interviews, but why aren't the systems changing? So I really feel like there needs to be more measurables out there. And then also in regard, again, going back to the systems of like, about companies being real, like, hey, this system is white fragility. Let's talk about it. Let's just talk about it. Like, that's how to be accountable. Let's just talk about it. For sure, I think that would bring up so much great change, to be quite honest. I think the accountability should start there. And then the second thing, again, going back to, you know, just what Andres said, which is that the students feel heard. Like, what is it that you need? What do you think is different? What is it that you would like to see? I feel like there's always so much talk about retention with the youth, but obviously something's happening that they're still not being heard. So let's talk about it. Again, I think we have such a great opportunity right now to have good listening sessions about how things can change, how things can feel like we're connecting. So then we have this wonderful creative workforce. I mean, the evolvement of this next generation is the beauty of your creativity, the beauty in which you all connect. And why not us understand that in a different light? I don't know. There's so much to say about this. But first of all, I think the accountability is, again, owning white fragility and really like, let's tackle that. Let's tackle that. And then second, really be about the listening.
All right. Navigating charging stations. Okay, here we go. Yeah, and I just want to say as like a, you know, I don't want to say final note because we actually have questions. But I just want to say also, I think an important part of this whole discussion is that we need intergenerational support. And we also need to address that like young people of color, like, yeah, that like we're all like, we can also learn from like our elders and other people who have been doing this work for a long time, while also having older folks like value like younger people coming into this movement in this space. And even though we have a different methodology or language or approach, that like when we're talking about equity and inclusion, we should value that too. So I just wanted to bring that up, that, you know, I think this is an intergenerational conversation, which I think is really exciting. And I think this is more of the kinds of spaces that I think need to happen to keep envisioning what this could look like. So yes, I think this is really cool.
You're absolutely right, Christy. Intergenerational conversations are beautiful to me. You know, sometimes I hear this, another topic, sometimes I hear people say, oh, those millennials. I'm like, what about them? They're beautiful. Like, I hate when people say it in that way. And I think, again, you're right. It's very important for us to have those intergenerational conversations and really see the beauty in it, because it's always pushing us forward.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love it. So we do have a question just to kick us off. The question just asks, does Green 2.0 also report on how equity stands in organizations' external strategies as part of their intended social impact? If not, can that be built in the future? And I'll send that to Andres.
We currently don't. One of the things that we're doing at Green 2.0 is that we're adding reports every year. So this year, for example, we are bringing out our first ever resource guide. It's the first of its kind. It's for foundations and organizations to find and have a resource to of how to ask questions around diversity internally. So when I first got to Green 2.0, I kept hearing about from foundations and organizations saying, we wish there was some kind of like roadmap or resource guide that showed us how to properly ask these questions. And so I kept hearing it over and over again. And finally, I was like, I'm just going to raise my hand and we're going to do it, because I don't want to hear this question asked anymore. And it's so important and critical. So we'll do it. And so that comes out at the end of July. And then we have a white paper that's coming out that talks about how communities of color are impacted by environmental catastrophic events in coastal communities. We also have a report card which comes out in November. And we're doing a whole new twist on this, Christy. You're gonna love it. So really quickly, we used to, historically, we looked at the top 40 foundations, looked at the top 40 environmental groups, asked them to be transparent. Some of that was working and some of that wasn't. As both of you probably saw in our last report card, 37 out of 40 organizations were transparent. 11 out of 40 foundations were transparent. What are we seeing year to year? Organizations are being more transparent, foundations are not. Why? Well, there's lots of reasons around that. Possibly a reason is that foundations hold the checkbooks and it's harder to get them to be transparent and to want to be transparent, where organizations are getting pulled from foundations, from other colleagues, from groups like Green 2.0 to say, you have to be transparent. It's been too long. Why aren't you being open about this? And so with that in mind, I've taken away the top 40. I've never believed in this top 40 approach because what happens if you're 41? You're like, phew, I'm 41, I lucked out. I don't have to be transparent. So we're gonna change things around. On the environmental reporting, we're going to take away the 40 and we're going to open it up to 80 groups. Small, medium, and large, because Christy, I want no excuses from any organization saying I'm too small, I'm too big, I'm right in that middle and it's too hard to do. I want organizations of all sizes to be transparent and open because it is critical that they are. And so year one, since I've been here, we've doubled it, and we're doing the opt-in ability with this reporting, which I think is going to be great. And I think we're going to bring in a bunch of groups that would love to participate but haven't historically. And then on the foundation front, and this is a pretty big switch, I'm dropping on the foundation side, we're dropping the transparency requirement. You don't want to be transparent, foundations? Well, I'm not going to bang my head anymore. Don't be transparent. That's fine. So what are we going to do? We're going to go after the money. Are these foundations giving to organizations that are run by and led by people of color for communities of color? We want to know if what we have been hearing for the last year and a half, the last year about all of these foundations saying, oh, we totally commit and we're putting all of this money and this is, we're going to put it on social media and so it must be real. We're going to find out if this is true or not. Are foundations actually giving equally, and I underline the word equally, to organizations that need it, that are on the ground, and again, run by people of color. So we're really excited about this change. This report card will be out in November. Stay tuned, and we're really excited about it. And to answer the original question, we're always looking for ideas for reports. 2022 is going to bring a host of brand new ideas and new reports, but we, as always, will continue to do our report card because we know how critical and important it is to our community.
Wow, that's actually so timely because I'm releasing a blog this weekend talking about like our philanthropy is actually funding climate justice. And I was like, there's literally no research on the internet about this. So I'm really excited. I'll like do like a little revision, be like, this is out now. Anyways, that's great. Anyways, this question's for Patty. How can organizations ensure, let me make sure I don't misquote the question. The question asks, what are some of the best practices for ensuring diverse slates of candidates for organizations or institutions?
So just to clarify, I'm not a diversity expert. I'm a sustainability professional that's worked on like climate initiatives, and I'm a person of color. So that type of question I'm not a diversity professional. Like that's not my day-to-day. But my experience in that as a sustainability professional applies to like your questions, but I can't really answer to that question because then that will mean that that's my day-to-day job and it's not. I don't know if Andres can answer that question.
I'll try. Kristen, want to shoot it at me one more time? That'd be fantastic.
The question was just, how can organizations do a better job at slating more diverse candidates?
That's a great question. Yeah. So number one is, where are you putting your application or your job postings? Are they going to the same places that you always put them with the same candidates? Are you going to like Green Latinos, for example, or Green 2.0, or are you expanding where and how you're putting your jobs in the language of these job postings? Because that is key. If you continue to put them in the same place, you're going to get the same candidate with the same results. If you are looking around and you are being smart and creative and bringing in all of these wonderful resources and tools and different listservs that there are plenty of, you're going to find those amazing candidates because they are out there. One thing I never want to hear is that there are no people of color for these positions or for this job. There are amazing people of color for every job. The question is, are you actually looking for them? And so I would suggest that if you are looking to post, make sure that you're broadening your search, that you're casting a wider net, that you're going to those historically, historical Black colleges, that you're looking at universities where it's not a 99% white, student body, that you're going to those universities and colleges and your career fair, job fairs, where you're going to find this unique and diverse background and amazing people. So it all starts with how you write your job posting, and it's all very important about where you're posting that.
I think now I fully see how, yeah, I could see it too with how Andres said it. So yes, so what I understand is that from Shantae and Jordy, the founders of Wokesis, that there have been organizations that have reached out to Wokesis, Women of Color Collective and Sustainability, for us to post their post within our social media. So yes, to your point, Andres, like, yes, they should partner with organizations of color so then that they can highlight that posting. Another thing that I always thought of was, why not LinkedIn also have a subcategory for people of color? You know what I mean? Like, these are large organizations that have a massive, I mean, why not? You know? So anyway, ideas out there, right?
I love that. Yeah, I did want to ask you, just like, you all both said towards the beginning, you kind of kept it broad, like that work, you've seen organizations do things well where they're like, actually, I guess you've kind of alluded to it already, like saying, there should be measurement, transparency, accountability, like not tokenization. Are there any other specific things that you've seen done like not well by organizations that you think people should avoid? Would love to throw those in there. If there's any specifics you'd like to offer or any information, because yeah, love to know.
Patty, would you like to go or do you want me to go? I'm fine either way.
I think for me, just through experience of what I think organizations should not do. Again, I think it always comes back to the realism of white fragility, because my experience of being out there and, searching for a job, in the level that I'm in, and I'm always like, oh, you hired that person? Like, why? So I think, like, being real, like sometimes the audience, the people that are hiring, they are comfortable with a certain way in which it looks. I am from LA. I do have an accent, but guess what? I have a whole litany of like what I've done. And that's what will tell you that I can do it. Only because I speak a certain way, that shouldn't be your criteria, your comfort level. So I think that is something in regards to what has been going wrong. Second, in regards to, yes, about how like what you said, Andres, with your report card, everybody's saying they're doing all these things last year. All right, show us what that looks like. So I think the realism of what it means, the realism of like, oh, I said this, but yeah, but your employee just said that they had a situation happen and you're not really saying what you said. You're not walking the talk. So all these, like, the realities of what is going on. So what has gone wrong is people's comfort levels need to be on check. And second, like, let's be real about what you really are going to do in regards to this equity policy. Let's be real.
I'll just add that the two things that have gone wrong, there's many, but for the time we have today is, one, organizations trying to, and you alluded to this earlier, I think Christy, has put a Band-Aid over their problem. Guess what? Band-Aids they'll always fall off. So yes, it might, it might pull the curtain over funders' eyes for so long, but at the end of the day, organizations will be revealed. Their intentions will be put out there. And so if you have a task force and all you wanted to do is let your funders know that you're working on this by putting together a task force that was never meant to do anything, if you don't actually care and prioritize this issue clearly to your organization, to your staff, and to your mission, you're doing it all wrong. And if you're not willing to and want to change culturally as an organization, you will not be doing anyone a service, your staff, your members, your volunteers, or your organization.
That was excellent. As our last question, and just because I always love to like not leave conversations open-ended, do you all have any like recommended readings or trainings or resources that can help people address things like implicit bias, white fragility in the workplace, diversity and inclusion in the workplace? Would love if there's anything you've been reading or listening to that's on your mind that you feel could be relevant for the audience to walk away with today.
Yeah, I just put it in the chat. Go to our Green 2.0 website. as you mentioned, Christy, we have, and I mentioned, there's different reports that are our year-to-year reports around transparency, but also kind of retention, what's happening when it comes to retention. And we have all sorts of reports on our website. And we love when other organizations or individuals post about it and put it out there and help share these reports, because the more that they're shared, the more that someone who didn't know they existed can be like, oh, I didn't even know this, and now I do. And so we always encourage folks to read them, to tweet them, to reshare them. It's fantastic. So feel free to jump on our website and check that out.
I think Andres's resources are great. Also, I think, you know, we all know the books. You just said too, Christy, you named a whole bunch of good books in regards to great reads. But I think internally, we all need to first look like, what am I defending? Am I open to this? Can I be open to this? Because you can read whatever you want, you can misinterpret it, but you have to be ready to be uncomfortable. So my ask is, be uncomfortable and be ready to really be part of the solution. Like, don't be part of the system that has created this. So be part of the solution.
Thank you so much. This is awesome.
Yes, this has been great. Thank you so much, Christy, Andreas, and Patty. This has been excellent. I hope I'm sure everyone was able to take away something from this workshop today. Hope everyone has a great weekend, and thanks again. Bye.
Thank you.